Hello, Sagittarius, and welcome back. Take a moment to settle in, get comfortable, and allow yourself to be present with whatever message is meant to find you today. As I connect with your energy, I have to say, this feels like a very emotional connection. There is someone here who may be carrying much more in their heart than they have ever allowed you to see. The first card catching my attention is the Lovers. And what feels important isn't just the connection itself, it's the choice surrounding it. I keep feeling like this person stands at a crossroads in their life. Their heart seems to know one thing, while their circumstances keep pulling them towards something else. For some of you, this could involve another relationship. For others, it may be family expectations, responsibilities, fear, guilt, or a situation that has been difficult for them to walk away from. What keeps standing out is that this person doesn't seem completely at peace where they are. They may have convinced themselves that staying where they are was the safer option. Maybe it felt more predictable. Maybe it felt less risky. But deep down, there is a part of them that keeps drifting back toward you. I see the Six of Cups appearing here, and the energy feels very nostalgic. It's almost like memories have become impossible for them to escape. Certain conversations, certain moments, little details that shouldn't matter anymore, but somehow still do. They may hear a song, pass a familiar place, or experience something small during their day, and suddenly you're on their mind again. What makes this interesting is that the memories don't seem to be fading with time. If anything, they appear to be growing stronger. There is something about your energy that made this person feel alive. Not because you completed them, not because you fixed them, but because around you, they felt like they could be themselves. Sagittarius, your energy often carries a sense of freedom. You encourage people to dream bigger, feel deeper, and question the limitations they've placed on their own lives. And I feel like this person experienced that with you. Being around you may have shown them a version of life that felt more authentic than what they were used to. Yet the Eight of Swords keeps appearing around their energy. Every time they begin moving toward what they truly feel, something seems to stop them. Sometimes it may be external circumstances. Sometimes it may be their own fears. Honestly, it feels like a combination of both. There is a lot of overthinking here, a lot of mental loops, a lot of questions they keep asking themselves when nobody else is around. What if I made the wrong choice? What if I walked away from something important? What if I allowed fear to decide my future? Yeah, those questions feel very loud right now. The thing is, I don't get the feeling that this person expected you to leave such a lasting impact on them. I think part of them believed these emotions would eventually disappear. They may have assumed they could move on, focus elsewhere, and continue with the life they already knew. But emotions have a way of resurfacing when they haven't been fully acknowledged. The card Temperance appears, and I feel a very gentle energy around it. Not rushed, not forced. Almost like life is quietly showing this person something they have been trying not to see. There seems to be a growing awareness that real love should not feel like a cage. It should not feel like constant pressure or obligation. It should not require someone to abandon themselves just to maintain peace. Oh my God, it's almost like this realization keeps returning to them in different forms. The more they reflect on their situation, the more they begin comparing what feels genuine versus what simply feels familiar. And those are not always the same thing. I feel like they miss the honesty that existed between you. They miss the way conversations flowed. They miss the feeling of being understood without having to explain every part of themselves. Even if they haven't admitted this out loud, the energy suggests these thoughts have been growing stronger recently. For many of you, this person may still appear distant on the surface. They may seem occupied with other responsibilities or other circumstances. Yet underneath that exterior, there is a heart that keeps wandering back to Sagittarius, trying to understand why this connection still feels so significant after everything that has happened. And what I'm hearing more than anything is that this story may be far from finished. The Five of Cups keeps pulling my attention in a very specific direction. This doesn't feel like someone casually reflecting on the past. This feels like someone replaying moments over and over again, almost wishing they could step back into a particular conversation and choose different words. There is a heaviness here that seems difficult for them to shake. I keep seeing this person alone with their thoughts. Maybe late at night, maybe during quiet moments when nobody is around to distract them. The noise of daily life fades for a second, and suddenly all the things they avoided feeling begin rising to the surface. The memories are not what troubles them the most. It's the realization that they had opportunities they didn't take. Sagittarius, I think this person thought they had more time than they actually did. There is something about timing that feels important here. They may have believed they could figure things out later. They may have convinced themselves that there would always be another chance to explain, another chance to reach out, another chance to tell you what was really happening inside their heart. But life doesn't always move according to the plans we create in our heads. The Nine of Swords appears, and the energy becomes restless. I don't feel peace around this card. I feel questions, endless questions. What if I made the wrong choice? What if I let fear make decisions for me? What if the person I cannot stop thinking about is no longer waiting? Yeah, that last question feels especially difficult for them, because I don't think their biggest fear is rejection. Their biggest fear seems to be discovering that you have finally reached a place where you no longer need answers from them. There is a difference. Rejection still means someone cares enough to respond. Indifference feels much scarier. The strange thing is that this person may not have fully understood the weight of their silence while they were living through it. They were focused on protecting themselves, protecting their comfort zone, protecting whatever structure they thought was keeping their life together. But protection sometimes comes at a cost. And the cost here feels emotional. The Hermit appears, and I can almost feel them withdrawing into themselves. Not because they don't care, not because their feelings disappeared. If anything, their feelings seem stronger than before. The problem is that emotions have become tangled up with regret. Oh my God. Regret has a way of changing how people see everything. A conversation that once felt insignificant suddenly becomes important. A missed opportunity becomes impossible to forget. A person who once seemed available begins to feel distant. And that's where this energy seems to be living right now. I keep hearing this person wondering how they would even begin. What could they possibly say after so much time? How do you explain fear? How do you explain choosing familiarity over possibility? How do you explain running from something that felt real because it scared you more than anything else? Those questions don't seem to have easy answers. The Judgment card enters the reading, and the atmosphere shifts. There is something awakening inside this person. Not a sudden solution, not a perfect plan, more like an uncomfortable honesty they can no longer avoid. For a long time, they may have focused on external reasons. Circumstances, responsibilities, other people, timing, expectations. But I think they're starting to recognize that some of the biggest obstacles came from within. That realization isn't easy, because once someone understands their own role in what happened, excuses begin losing their power. I feel this person standing face to face with truths they spent a long time avoiding. They can see where fear influenced their decisions. They can see where silence created distance. They can see where pride kept them from expressing what their heart already knew. And Sagittarius, there is something else coming through very strongly. This person worries that you may have changed. Not in a negative way. They worry you've grown stronger. They worry you've healed. They worry you've built a life that no longer revolves around waiting for them to figure themselves out. There is admiration in that thought, but there is also sadness, because while they are still trying to understand how to bridge the gap between the past and the present, part of them keeps wondering whether the door they left behind is still open. And for the first time in a very long time, that uncertainty appears to be affecting them more than they ever expected. The Emperor shows up here, and the energy around this person feels very different from what they allowed anyone else to see. I don't think they wanted to appear vulnerable. In fact, vulnerability may have been one of the things they tried hardest to avoid. There is something about this person that seems deeply connected to control. Control over their emotions, control over their image, control over how much access other people have to their heart. The strange thing is that when someone spends too much energy trying to stay in control, they often lose touch with what they're actually feeling. And that's exactly what this situation feels like. I keep seeing moments where this person knew they cared more than they admitted. They knew your presence affected them. They knew conversations with you stayed in their mind long after they ended. Yet every time those emotions started getting stronger, they seemed to tighten their grip even more. Almost as if admitting the truth would somehow make them weaker. Sagittarius, I feel like they underestimated you. Not in a cruel way. They underestimated your ability to walk away from confusion. They underestimated your ability to choose yourself. They underestimated how quickly your energy shifts once you realize you're giving more than you're receiving. The Four of Pentacles appears, and I can feel this person holding on tightly to something, not necessarily to you directly, but to their old habits, their old patterns, their need to feel safe. It's almost like they believed if they revealed too much, they would lose power. So they stayed guarded. They held back words they wanted to say. They held back affection they wanted to show. They held back honesty they desperately needed to express. And for a while, they may have convinced themselves that this approach was working. But silence has consequences. Distance has consequences. Pretending not to care has consequences. What feels especially significant is that Sagittarius isn't an energy that can be trapped inside emotional uncertainty forever. Your energy naturally moves, it grows, it expands, it seeks truth. The more this person tried to maintain control, the more they may have felt you slipping beyond their reach. Not because you stopped caring, not because you became cold, but because your spirit refuses to stay confined inside situations that no longer feel authentic. Yeah, that realization seems to have shaken them more than they expected. The moon appears, and suddenly there are emotions everywhere. Emotions they tried to bury, emotions they tried to rationalize, emotions they tried to hide behind logic, pride, or distraction. Oh my God, this person may have spent so much time trying not to feel that they never realized how much was accumulating beneath the surface. It's like opening a door they kept locked for far too long. I keep sensing confusion mixed with longing, fear mixed with desire, hope mixed with regret. There are moments when they feel ready to move closer, and moments when they retreat back into old fears. It's not because their feelings aren't real, it's because they are finally confronting emotions they spent a very long time avoiding, and somewhere inside all of this, there is also admiration, a lot of admiration. The Queen of Wands enters the reading, and immediately I think of how they view you: strong, confident, independent, authentic, not perfect, not unreachable, but undeniably powerful. There is something about the way Sagittarius carries themselves that this person cannot stop noticing. You don't always need validation from others to know your worth. You don't need constant reassurance to keep moving forward. And I think that's part of what both attracts and intimidates them. Because your confidence forces them to look at the places where they lack confidence. Your honesty forces them to look at the truths they've been avoiding. Your courage forces them to examine their own fears. I feel like this person once believed they could manage the connection from a distance. They could keep you close enough to feel your presence while never fully committing to what their heart wanted. But Sagittarius isn't meant to live inside emotional waiting rooms, and deep down, they know that. There is a growing awareness that emotional games don't work with someone whose spirit values freedom. Mixed signals don't work. Half-truths don't work. Avoidance doesn't work. The more they observe your energy, the more they begin realizing that if they ever want something meaningful, they will eventually have to show up as their real self. No masks, no control tactics, no carefully calculated distance, just honesty. And for someone who has spent so much of their life trying to stay protected, that may be one of the most frightening realizations of all. The Wheel of Fortune appears, and the energy surrounding this person feels like life has started moving in ways they can no longer predict. There is something about this period that feels deeply transformative. Not because they planned it, not because they wanted everything to change, but because certain lessons seem to be arriving whether they're ready or not. I keep getting the feeling that some of the choices they once felt comfortable with are no longer bringing them the same sense of security. Situations that used to feel stable suddenly feel uncertain. Relationships they relied on begin revealing cracks they didn't want to acknowledge. Patterns that once protected them are becoming harder to justify. It's almost like life is holding up a mirror, and what they're seeing in that mirror isn't always easy. Sagittarius, I don't think this person expected their own decisions to follow them this far. For a long time, they may have believed they could postpone difficult conversations, they could avoid difficult truths. They could continue balancing multiple responsibilities without confronting what their heart was actually trying to tell them. But the energy is shifting, the wheel of fortune keeps turning, and with every turn, something old seems to lose its grip. I keep seeing this person standing between two different versions of themselves. One version wants to remain attached to everything familiar. The other version is beginning to understand that growth often requires letting go of what no longer fits. That realization feels uncomfortable, because letting go doesn't always mean losing people. Sometimes it means losing identities, losing expectations, losing stories we've told ourselves for years. The world appears beside this energy, and immediately I feel the presence of a cycle reaching its natural conclusion. There are chapters in this person's life that seem exhausted, not necessarily dramatic endings, more like situations that have quietly served their purpose and can no longer continue the same way. Yeah, I keep hearing the phrase, "I can't keep pretending," not necessarily directed toward Sagittarius, directed toward themselves, because the longer they ignore what they're feeling, the heavier everything becomes. And I think that's where the real awakening begins. The Strength card enters the reading, and something changes inside their energy. Not overnight, not all at once, more like a slow decision to stop running from themselves. Oh my God, courage looks very different than most people imagine. Sometimes courage isn't making a grand gesture. Sometimes courage is admitting you've been afraid. Sometimes courage is accepting responsibility. Sometimes courage is allowing yourself to feel emotions you've spent years trying to control. This person appears to be learning that lesson. I feel them confronting fears they never wanted to face. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of losing control. Yet the more they sit with those fears, the more they begin realizing that fear has been quietly directing their choices for far too long. And Sagittarius, there is something beautiful happening here. The external voices that once seemed so important are becoming quieter. Family expectations, social pressure, the opinions of other people, old obligations, whatever held power over them before doesn't seem to carry the same weight anymore. It's not that those influences disappear, it's that this person is finally starting to question whether those influences deserve so much authority over their life. Justice appears, and the atmosphere becomes very honest. There is accountability here, a deep level of accountability, not punishment, not revenge, just truth. The kind of truth that arrives when someone can no longer blame circumstances for everything that happened. I feel this person recognizing where they abandoned themselves, where they abandoned their own feelings, where they chose comfort instead of authenticity, where they remained silent when honesty was needed. And strangely enough, this realization isn't destroying them, it's changing them. Because every honest answer seems to lead them closer to understanding who they really are beneath all the fear. The version of this person emerging from this period feels different than the one who entered it. More self-aware, more grounded, more willing to take responsibility. There is still uncertainty around them. There are still loose ends that need attention. There are still situations requiring closure before new doors can fully open. But the energy no longer feels trapped. It feels like movement. It feels like preparation. It feels like someone standing at the edge of a major life lesson and finally understanding why they had to walk through it. A quiet awareness keeps growing inside them that freedom isn't found by controlling every outcome. Freedom comes from living in alignment with what feels true. And that understanding may end up changing far more than they ever expected. The Page of Pentacles arrives with a very different feeling. The energy no longer feels trapped inside endless reflection. It feels tentative, careful, maybe even a little nervous, but there is movement here. Small movement, meaningful movement. I keep seeing someone standing in front of a message they haven't sent yet, a conversation they keep rehearsing in their mind, words they have rewritten 100 times without ever speaking them aloud. Because the truth is, Sagittarius, this person seems to understand that intentions alone are no longer enough. Thinking about you isn't enough. Missing you isn't enough. Wishing things had gone differently isn't enough. Something inside them is beginning to recognize that real change eventually requires action. And honestly, that realization appears both exciting and terrifying for them. One thing I keep feeling very strongly is that this person sees you differently than they did before. Not because you've become someone else, not because you've transformed into a completely different person, but because distance has given them perspective. There are people who enter our lives and fit neatly into the plans we already have. And then there are people who completely change how we imagine the future. You feel more like the second category. I think that's part of what unsettled them from the very beginning. You represented possibility, a different life, a different version of themselves, a future they may not have felt ready to embrace when the opportunity first appeared. The Ace of Wands appears, and suddenly I feel a spark returning to this connection. Not necessarily in a dramatic way, more like a growing desire to stop hiding behind uncertainty. Oh my God, I feel this person becoming tired of their own excuses, tired of waiting for perfect timing, tired of convincing themselves they'll deal with everything later. Because later has a way of becoming much longer than expected. There is something very human about this energy. They know mistakes were made. They know certain wounds cannot simply be erased. They know trust, once damaged, may take time to rebuild. And that is exactly what worries them. I keep hearing a question repeating itself in their mind. Would Sagittarius even believe me? Not because they doubt their own feelings, because they doubt whether those feelings still matter after everything that happened. The fear of being misunderstood feels strong. The fear of being too late feels even stronger. The Knight of Wands enters the reading, and the energy becomes more restless. There is a growing urge to close the distance between what they feel and what they actually do. This card feels like someone reaching a point where standing still becomes harder than taking a risk. Yeah, I think they've spent enough time living inside their own head, enough time analyzing, enough time replaying old memories, enough time imagining conversations. The heart wants movement. The heart wants expression. The heart wants honesty. Whether that honesty arrives through a message, a conversation, or some unexpected opening, I feel this person becoming increasingly aware that silence no longer serves them the way it once did. The Magician appears, and something about this energy feels significant. Not because everything suddenly becomes perfect, not because every obstacle disappears, but because there is a shift from wishing to creating, from hoping to participating, from dreaming about possibilities to exploring them. This person seems to be realizing that if they want a different outcome, they must show up differently than they did before. And that starts with truth. Truth about their feelings, truth about their fears, truth about the choices they regret, truth about what you have meant to them all along. I don't feel someone trying to maintain a complicated illusion anymore. I feel someone becoming exhausted by confusion. Someone who wants clarity. Someone who wants authenticity. Someone who is beginning to understand that real connection cannot survive inside half-truths forever. Sagittarius, the strongest message coming through is not about guarantees. It's about willingness. A willingness to confront the past. A willingness to acknowledge mistakes. A willingness to speak from the heart instead of from fear. And sometimes that willingness becomes the first step toward an entirely new chapter. Because when people finally stop running from what they feel, life has a curious way of opening doors they once believed were permanently closed. There is a feeling here that life has been quietly moving pieces into place, even during the moments when nothing seemed to be happening at all. Sometimes distance creates clarity, sometimes silence reveals what words could not, and sometimes a person has to lose sight of something precious before they fully understand its value. Whatever path this connection ultimately chooses, I hope this reading reminds you of something important, Sagittarius. You should never have to shrink yourself, chase certainty from someone who isn't ready to give it, or carry the weight of another person's healing on your shoulders. Your light deserves to be met, not hidden from. Trust your journey. Trust your growth. Trust the wisdom you've gained along the way. That's all I've got for you for this reading. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I really appreciate it. You all mean a lot, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Okay, bye.